I was bugging the hell out of all the photo editors. I'm sure
Yeah.
they were so irritated with me, but it seemed
Awesome.
like every week I was emailing them being like, hey, it's me again. I've got like a cool new batch of photos for you if you're interested. And
Yeah, nice.
finally they started replying. And
Marcus Paladino, welcome to the Salt Sessions, mate. Thank you so much for coming on here. Super stoked you can spend the time.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad we were able to figure out the time zones. So
100%. Yeah, definitely. So, I guess for people that maybe don't know you or haven't seen your work, can you just give us a little bit of a background? So, like, I guess where you're from in reference to the time zone, and then maybe just how this all started for you, how you got a camera in your hand.
Yeah, so I live I'm from Vancouver Island, and I live in Tofino, British Columbia, Canada. And I've been shooting professionally for 7 or 8 years now. I've lived in Tofino for about 12 years. And I just got started when I was in like a little later in high school. I started playing around with my mom's old film camera and stuff, and joined photography class in high school, and it all just sort of like snowballed. I didn't really like necessarily have these wild ambitions of becoming a professional surf photographer. I didn't even surf until I was maybe like 20 years old, right?
Okay. So, yeah. Wow. Cool. Yep. Yeah. Nice.
And then it's like I went to school for photography too, right? But at that time, I still didn't know like what aspect of photography I was aiming for. I just knew that I wanted to like have the tools to be able to do whatever I wanted.
Yeah, for sure. And so so how did the surf stuff come about? Like I was kind of similar. Like when I first picked up a camera, I was just traveling, so it was like travel photos, and then started looking stuff up and was taking landscapes, and then finally, like I grew up on a beach and had lived in a city for a while, and then moved back to the beach, and then just woke up one morning. I'm like, wow, I live like there's waves like right on my front door now. So I just got like obsessed with like shooting waves. So yeah, how did that kind of?
Well, it all kind of happened once I moved to Tofino. Kind of just like a bit of a lone wolf and just kind of moved here on a whim. I didn't know anybody, and I spent plenty of time walking around the beach by myself, just sort of like enjoying the environment. So I just always walk around with a camera in my hand and just like take photos of like the ocean and trees, and surfers kind of caught my eye too. And I started surfing once I moved here, and I ended up meeting a bunch of really great friends that I'm still really close friends with today. And they taught me a lot about surfing, but I also learned a lot about surf photography through them because I just started taking photos of my friends surfing, right?
Yeah.
So from there, that's where I was able to not hone my style, but like learn what to look for in a surf image, right? So
for sure. Yeah.
I think that's the best advice like you can give anybody is just like take photos of people who are better than you and help you kind of transition into that, because it's like I didn't start shooting professional surfers like right off the bat or anything. It was just my homies.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I talk to people about that a lot. I mean, it's especially, every subject matter has its own unique things, but especially surfing is like understanding the sport itself, understanding the movements, or anticipating like what's about to come, or, like moments in a turn, or, when there's about to be an air, like that just comes with experience of shooting a lot of surfing for sure.
Yeah. And I'm such an avid surfer as well that I feel like the two are kind of like blending into each other as far as like I was learning how to hone my own skills as a surfer, but also as a surf photographer.
Was that kind of happening simultaneously? If you mentioned you didn't start surfing till you were 20?
Yeah, it was definitely a fine balance of like just wanting to go surf myself, but also wanting to like keep up with the photography thing. And like, it's interesting nowadays because a lot of people like ask me, they're like, oh, like when the waves are like pumping, like, don't you just want to go surf, but you're stuck shooting? I'm like, not really, because I'd rather see like really talented surfers surf those waves than me just do like a loopy cutback or something,
Yeah. I'm pretty lucky in that regard. Like I bodyboarded a lot when I was like growing up because I lived near the beach, but I can't really surf to save my life, and I just fell in love with photography. So it's it's not a hard choice when the surf's good here. Yeah.
It's ironic because I actually prefer to surf if the waves are really bad. I'm not thinking about the photos I'm missing or anything.
For sure,
like,
yeah.
If I am shooting and the waves suck, I'm just kind of like, oh, I'd just rather go surf right now and get some exercise.
Definitely. Has it helped a bit with your, I guess, visualizing shots, like being out there surfing, like being like, I guess, in certain moments, and that has it helped you kind of then like hone your photography in the way that you can kind of see it differently?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think so.
Mm.
Maybe not necessarily like hone my photography, but it definitely gets me fired up,
Yep.
because I think when you shoot so much, you definitely can get pretty burnt out on it. You're
Mm-hmm.
like shooting, editing, emails, like it's just
Mm.
kind of it's a cycle. So it's like to kind of put everything down and go for a surf, and then you see like just a little twinkle in the wave, and you're kind of like, oh, that might be a cool photo, and then it gets you fired
Yeah.
up, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
really good thing to like put down the camera sometimes and just enjoy whatever you're shooting yourself.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with traveling. It's people often will say it's like, well, did you really experience the culture and the travel in the place if you didn't, get to view it from not a viewfinder, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
100%. Yeah, for sure. Do you think with the surf stuff, like, is there like a photo or a session or a moment that you kind of remember early on, like when you kind of first started maybe like shooting your friends? Was there any kind of point where you were like, yep, this is, you kind of knew either this is what I want to do, or even this is something I can do? Like maybe you took a really good photo and you're like, this is something I can work with?
Yeah, there was a day out here, and it was probably the biggest, cleanest swell to this day I've ever seen. It was like my first winter out here. Maybe it was my second, but I went out with my good friend Derek, and the place we were gonna go surf was where all the pros went, and it's where
Okay.
the barrels were heavy, and it was this
Yeah.
super early morning trip. It was like an hour away, and he ended up going out and getting a couple, but it was like such an amazing moment to be on the beach with like a bunch of other like pro photographers and filmers that like
Yeah.
I knew who they all were and stuff, and
Yeah.
seeing all these guys in the lineup just killing it. And I don't know, there was a moment where I was like, whoa, like this is what I want to do. This is it. I want to do this, what I'm doing right now, just like forever.
Yeah.
As some
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
remember telling my friend when he got out, I was like, oh man, like this is it. This is what
This
I
is
want to
it.
do.
Yeah, unreal. That's amazing. So is it a pretty big, like when you mentioned there's like those pros out there surfing, other photographers and stuff, is it a pretty big scene?
You know what? It's like big fish in small ponds kind
Okay.
of thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have a few like international pros here, and like they really put kind of Canada on the map as far as like when the surf magazines were hot and like surf videos and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a bunch of like up and coming Groms and just locally sponsored kids who just all
Yeah.
ripped.
Yeah. 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 Cool. So do you think like, so your style, like, I mean, I love like all of your work, but I'm a massive fan of the pulled back stuff, the incorporating
Oh
the
yeah.
scenery kind of thing. Like I see a lot of like Mark McInnes style, like in your work. And I guess, he's from like a similar area and everything. So there's a lot of amazing landscapes there. And, I tend to kind of call it like surfscape. Like when I shoot, I tend to kind of think as the surfer as like the subject, but placing them in like a wider scene to try and, like have the surroundings in it. Yeah. And obviously you got like a lot of that, but also you shoot in the water up close as well. So how much do you think of your styles come from, like, I guess, being a product of the environment where you're shooting, or did you have, did you sort of follow people? Did you have a certain style that you liked, like before you started shooting? How do you think that's come about?
That's a really good question, actually. I feel like when I first started shooting surfing, I was just obsessed with like the action, and I wanted to just be as tight as possible to get the spray and the body movement, and like that was just like that was it. And then I felt slowly I kept pulling back a bit more and more and more, because I realized that like we might not have like the greatest waves in Canada compared to like the rest of the world, and we might not have like the plethora of professional surfers. So it's like the one thing we really do have going for it is we're just like surrounded by such beautiful nature, like mountains, the trees, everything. So once I started getting my foot in the door of like the surf industry and stuff, I realized that that's what it really spoke to people, because not a lot of other places have that, right?
Yeah.
So I think I just started taking advantage of any opportunity to like shoot with a new backdrop. So that's kind of something I always look for, especially if I go to like a new spot. I'm kind of like, okay, what's the backdrop here? Like what angle is going to be best for that, right?
Yeah, definitely. So how often is it like good where you are? Like how often is the surf?
Well, it's like, here's interesting, because you can surf 365 days a year. Like it just might be like small or onshore or whatever. In the winter, that's when it gets good. So probably like October to February, I'd say those are the prime months. And there's just lots of swell and lots of storms. And just depending on the swell directions and which ways the wind is blowing, we can get some really good surf here. But for the most part, where I live, it's just like beach breaks. And then when you explore a bit around Vancouver Island, that's when you can find the points and the slabs and
Yeah. So I guess on that, like in the main season, when you know the conditions are good and you've got your spots, I guess, that you know will work, like what's the decision process between like going to a spot that you pretty much 100% know is going to be on and you're going to get good shots versus maybe utilizing that swell to go and discover somewhere new that might only be breaking, you know what I mean, on that?
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because this is a conversation we've had a lot because there's a bunch of very similar spots that work with very similar conditions. And a lot of times it's almost easier to just go to the places we know are like, guaranteed to get a little tube and get some turns and it'll be big, right? But we were kind of talking about, my friend, he's kind of putting together a surf film this year, and he really wants to focus on, shooting different waves in different areas and taking that chance of like maybe getting skunked, but trying a new zone and not just going what we're comfortable with. I'm really excited about that because I feel like I've shot so many spots here like a million times over. So I'm just excited to shoot a new area. Yeah,
definitely. Well, I mean, I feel like you've like, just like looking through like your work, you've got like a massive like catalog of stuff. So possibly like you're at a point now where you've got enough shots of certain areas, like not that you wouldn't want to go back there, but you could probably afford to take the risk to get skunked, like you said, because
totally. And I feel like as I'm coming of age too with like myself and my career, it's like I'm trying to work smarter, not harder in like everything these days. So yeah, nice. So can you, on that, you mentioned your career, so can you kind of tell us a bit about that? So are you full-time surf photography, or how does your sort of career work in that regard? Yeah, I'm pretty much just full-time surf photography. I do get a few commercial jobs that are outside of the realm of surfing here and there. But I would say my main gig is shooting surfing year round and kind of focusing on that, which I'm not, it's funny describing it because I'm like, wait, how does that even work? But then I'm like, wait, I've literally been doing it for years. So
well, how did the journey begin? Like how did you get into that becoming your income?
Well, I went on a surf trip with some friends and I had to quit my job at the surf shop to do it. And then once I got home, I was kind of like, all right, well, I'm 20, I think I was like 24 at the time. And I was like, okay, this is like the prime time. If I'm going to try and be a surf photographer, I should just like do it. So I didn't get a job, and I had just started shooting with like Pete DeVries and stuff, and had a few other talented friends. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to focus all my attention and energy onto this and just see what happens. Cause I think I was at the point of where, the old saying that's like, you'll regret it if you don't try, sort of thing.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
I didn't want to, wake up in my 40s and be like, oh man, I really should have like gave it a dig at surf photography. Like I was kind of prepared to fail. Then I could at least move on to be like, all right, the surf photography thing didn't work. Now I can focus on career and still enjoy taking photos, right? So that was my turning point anyway.
No, that's really cool. And so then how did what did your initial work kind of look like? Was it like back then, was it like magazine stuff? Like how was it sort of?
I feel like I caught the tail end of like the magazine hype, like Surfer and Surfing and Surfer's Journal and stuff. They were all still thriving, and even Canada had its own surf magazine, right? So I really caught the tail end of it because, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, right? So like when I looked at professional surf photography or just professional photographers in any realm of action sports, it was always in magazines. And I was like, that's how you make it in this world, is just like getting photos in magazines. I quickly learned that wasn't necessarily the case, but like for me, it was so gratifying to like just have something printed and open a page and see your photo. It was like that feeling was just worth more than any amount of money. I was just always like striving I was kind of chasing that dragon, and then magazines have sort of dwindled, and I feel like, I don't know, I haven't even like seen a surf magazine in so long besides like my Surfer's Journal subscription.
But I guess for sort of like people, because a lot of this stuff I love on this podcast is, I guess, sort of around like the mindset and the motivation have kind of got people to where they are. So that initial thing, was it just submitting photos? Like how did you sort of your magazine stuff come about in the first place? Were you just like submitting stuff in? Did you make some contacts? Like
I was bugging the hell out of all the photo editors. I'm sure they were so irritated with me, but it seemed like every week I was emailing them being like, hey, it's me again. I've got like a cool new batch of photos for you if you're interested. And, you know, finally they started replying, and, you know, they actually ended up giving me good advice too. And just being like, hey, you know, these photos are great, but there's no context. You know, we need like a story, or we need to see these people's personalities, or we need like you to showcase some adventure to this, not just like, here's the action, which is what I was so like focused on in the early stages. So that kind of helped me, you know, look at things a little bit differently and sort of like make sure to capture all these in-between moments. And Peter Taras from surfing at the time, he was a huge help. He was, you know, it's funny to think about now. So like every once in a while, I'll get emails or DMs from young up and coming photographers, and they always like want tips and tricks. And, you know, I'm not that busy of a person, but I'm always like, oh, I don't have time for this. But then I'm like, wait, Peter Taras didn't have time for, like, he was busier than me. And he was always, you know, taking the time to answer my emails and be super nice. So I always try and take that into my own sort of life as well now. So
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think this stuff's fascinating for people to hear. So then like when you got that, like you were submitting those photos and they were like, maybe they need a bit more context or something like that. So then you take that on board and then go out and try and like capture that stuff, like kind of, is that what sort of happened? And then you're sort of resubmitting and
well, I started just honing my skills too, right? Because it's like, I think for any photographer, looking at your early work is always pretty humbling. Because at the time you're like, oh no, this is a great shot. And then you look at it 5 years later and you're like, what was I thinking? Why did I edit it that way? Or like whatever. Right? And it's like, I get that all the time too. So I think it's all just like a matter of perspective.
Yeah. No, I just think it's fascinating, all those stories, because it's like, I feel like there's a bit of a, like with the whole like social media world, I think there's a lot of the whole concept. People are like, oh, maybe I'll post a photo and like get discovered, without kind of thinking of the grind behind it, like the people who are actually doing it and been doing it for so many years, like yourself. Like most of it's the same as like, like I had Mark McInnes on the podcast, and his story is very, very similar. And it's just like, I just hounded and then went and reset and then hounded again, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's not, no one's really got this like story of like, oh, I just took one photo and, you know, everyone loved it kind of thing. It's like, it's all the hard work behind the scenes that I think is really cool to highlight.
It seems like every like well-known or successful photographer, it's like they had such a grind at the start, and they even still do grind, you know. And I think that's kind of the, you know, there's no instant gratification. I feel like the older generation of photographers, and I'm like on the cusp, I'm only like 32, right? But the older generation of photographers, like, they don't mind putting in that hard work, because it's like they've already been doing it for so long. And like I remember making fun of Instagram when it first came out. I was like, that's not for real photographers. And it's like, all of a sudden I'm like, damn, I probably should have got Instagram earlier. Everyone who got it early is like blown up, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're doing all right. But yeah, it's super evident, I think, just in even like taking Instagram, for example, because that's where you can see like a lot of your work, but it's evident just the, you know, the 10,000 hours, so to speak, that you've definitely like put in and more, because like, you know, you'll just do a post that's like talking about like a front side air or something, and then there's 10 completely different images like of that. And then like, I love that all of your posts are like kind of carousel type things. So it's not just like one photo of it. It's clear that you've just been out like day after day, hour after hour, like shooting in all these different conditions. So which
thank you. That's something I'm kind of doing differently on Instagram these days. Is just like I'm trying to curate my posts a bit more to like one specific like idea or maneuver or whatever, because it's actually been really fun to like kind of rip through a few different hard drives and like go through some old photos and kind of like look at them differently and edit them and like re-edit them and stuff. And it's like there's a lot of photos I have that like, you know, maybe haven't really been seen on any sort of platform, because I just didn't think it would like hold its own weight on its own. That's the funny thing about social media. It's just like you put so much thought into it, but it really doesn't matter.
At the end of the day,
But for me, it's like more fun. Like I'm enjoying doing that more, and it makes it more exciting to post, right? And I don't know. I'm not too like worried about the algorithm anymore these days. It's just like it's just a fun sort of expression of getting more there, right?
Yeah. On that volume, I'll read it just to make sure I get it right. But I think it was a quote that I read like from your sister, and she said, "It's been interesting to watch you go from documenting action sports to an artistic expression of the sport and the lifestyle." So Can you talk to us a bit about that? And the reference is that I'm guessing it's only through shooting so much surfing and so many different conditions that you get to a point, like you said, when you started, it was all about maybe just capturing a specific bit of action to then being able to say, hey, I can start to look at this scene differently and, maybe risk, missing some certain shots that I used to take, but with the, the end result being like, a much more artistic, expression of it.
Yeah, no, that's bang on. And I didn't really even realize that I was necessarily doing that until my sister had said that. And I thought it was very beautifully said because I don't feel like I'm documenting things as much as I used to, because I felt like, I'm just sort of like a vessel for where I am and the surfing and the surfer. But I feel like I get to be a bit more creative these days. Maybe it's because I've done so much shooting and I've already sort of like taken that photo, whatever it is, a front air with trees in the background. So maybe that subconsciously gives me a bit of leeway to be like, oh, I don't need to take the same photo twice, even though it's impossible. Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's definitely helped my portfolio expand quite a bit because I have a lot of these like kind of rare shots or shots that might not even exist if I didn't think of them in a different way. Actually, I have a good rule of thumb, and it's if a moment or something in my shot is fleeting, I need to focus on that.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. That's something I always try and do. So it's like a quick example would be if there's like a bunch of birds in the foreground, pull back, keep those birds in the foreground. Yeah, they're not going to be there in 5 minutes, and you never know, you might get a cool shot with that. Yeah, so if I focus on something that could change, it's like that's
yeah, that's amazing. And so how no, it's cool. It's really good advice. Yeah. And so how over your time, like how critical are you of your own work? Like as you've sort of come along, like what is it about, I guess that firstly, and then what is it about an image that is something that'll make you go, yep, this is worth publishing, sending out, whatever it is?
Yeah, man, I am my own worst critic. It's actually pretty bad. It's like I'm never very satisfied with many of my photos, and it's like a blessing and a curse because I'm always trying to do better, but I also have this really small like realm of satisfaction. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I enjoy the most though? I enjoy other people telling me when they enjoy a certain photo and getting to hear why and what they like about it.
Yeah, cool.
Way more interesting than me being like, oh, this photo is cool, right?
Yeah.
What was the second
well, I guess I mean the second part is like what is it, so when you, because at some point like we can tell you what we like about it, but at some point like after a session, like you're going to go through photos, you have to pick one at some point, whether it's to submit it or to publish it or to post on Instagram. So like what are those, or even while you're shooting, like what's that thing that you're looking for really to sort of be like happy with the photo?
Interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. I think it's got to be eye-catching, and it's got to have some sort of like something like deeper to it,
Yeah,
like
cool.
Whether it's like certain shadows or lighting or like an expression on the surfer's face, just something that like just makes it different from everything else in a way.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that's kind of what I'm always looking for, is just something different.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And once again, it's only an answer I reckon that you can give through doing so much shooting, you know what I mean? Because you've just gone beyond the normal, like, the angle looks fine, or the lights like here, you know what I mean? It's got that like extra element to it. Yeah.
And one thing I do a lot of the times is I sit on photos, because like I think when you take them at the time, it's really exciting. And then when you sort of like put them away and don't look at them, and then you look at them like a month later, it's like they have a whole new sort of like fresh perspective to it because you didn't just shoot it.
Yep.
And within that folder, there's like always like one or two where you're like, whoa, that's a shot,
That's fascinating. Yeah. That's literally the exact question I had written down here. Is are you racing home after a session to go and look at photos? Like, do you ever do it? Like, you have a session where it's just, things are working. Like, are you kind of pumped to just go home? Like, I can't wait to like chuck the memory card in and check these out, or do you kind of like to marinate on them a bit?
No, well, like once I first take them, it's like I just want to like get them into the computer and look at them, because it's like, and I'm shooting, I kind of like black out what happens.
Yeah.
I can't remember the photos I've taken. Yeah. And then once I get home, it's kind of fun to like go through them, especially in the water too, because you don't really have time to like flip through the photos. You kind of have to like focus on what you're doing.
Yep.
So I love looking through the photos, but even once I've looked through them and I've got them into Lightroom and they're all set, I'll just close the computer for a couple days.
Yep.
And just leave it, because
Cool.
I just need I need those fresh eyes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's an interesting question to ask a lot of people, because sometimes it's like you want to kind of be like using the energy of like the moment when you caught it or just after that to like edit it so you can kind of remember what it's like. And then, there's a lot of people that like to kind of just like sit back. Yeah. As I said, let it marinate a bit and go and look at it with a different eye. So
I think one of the best decisions I ever made was to not rush to put photos on Instagram.
Cool.
Like get the photo, like quickly edit it, like throw it on there. Like that's not my jam anymore. I the photo to sit. I want it to marinate. And a lot of the times I'm posting photos that I took like months ago.
Yes.
And
awesome.
It kind of like, I like it because it trips people out because no one knows like where I am or what I'm shooting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's like summertime here right now. And it's like, I really haven't been shooting that much, especially surf stuff lately.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it because it's like, I'm posting surf shots every day.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why I was asking how good it is all the time over there, because it's like, Instagram's good like that. It's good every day. Yeah, I get the same here in where I am in Australia. So another quote that you mentioned once was, you said, I was told that shooting a variety of subjects will help develop my main focus of work. So I know you do like a lot of surf stuff, but I'm guessing as you came up, you probably shot like a lot of different things. And I was like very similar to that. So when I first started getting right into photography, I was watching an interview with Chris Burkhardt, and he was very much saying like, shoot everything, like this, that, blah, blah, because everything's going to help you. And so like when I first started out, like I would shoot, like weddings and like kids' birthdays and like school formals and just like every different situation where I could go and take photos and I guess get paid for it because I was starting out. But at the same time, I'd just take any job because I'm like, if I can get put in all of these different, situations, often with awkward lighting or just dealing with different people or whatever it is, then it's only going to make me a better photographer for the subject that I want to shoot, like, which is the ocean. So yeah, how do you think about that?
I think that is huge for sure. And I feel like for me personally, before I started shooting surfing, I shot lots of stuff. I shot skateboarding, mountain biking, snowboarding. It was a huge thing I was focusing on. And, once I got into shooting surfing, like you couldn't get me out of it. It was kind of like anything else that wasn't surfing. It was almost like taking away from like the surfing I could be shooting, And I remember like shooting a small wedding one time, and it was like a beachfront wedding, and I was shooting the bride and groom and like doing the thing, but then like I kept looking at the ocean and just like trying to incorporate some surfing into the background of this wedding.
Yeah.
Oh my, focus on what you're doing. Like, you know what I mean? So,
just get like a barrel in the background and they're kissing and they're blurry. And
what's funny is, I actually have a photo from that session that's really good, and it's like still on my website somewhere. And I remember, there's no bride and groom in it, but it's just like, I think it's Pete doing an air through the trees that I like quickly snagged like in between. That's awesome. I think there's benefits to both for sure, because I think, I don't know, you got to hone your skills and shoot everything, because just having a camera in your hand is huge. But for me, I definitely started to thrive at what I was doing once I just focused on surfing and the ocean and nature and that sort of realm.
Yeah, well, I think it's just something that's really important, because like I teach a lot of photography, and something that I think that I've heard you mention at some point is like you've got to the point through just taking so many photos that like all of your settings are just kind of like second nature now. And that was like the same as me. Like when I decided to start taking surf photos, like my business itself is called Daily Salt, and it was literally based on I'm going to go to the beach every single day and just take photos, rain, hail, or shine, so I can just like learn in like different conditions. And it gets to a point then where the settings part of it just becomes, you're changing them like while you're looking through, and it's like then you can start to think about things like composition and lighting and all of these other elements. And it's really only through doing that much shooting that you can get to that point. And it's just interesting when you're teaching people, because sometimes people get so stuck on like, the settings and this and that, and it just can end up, I guess, taking you out of the moment. Like the thing you were talking about before, I think once you get to the point where you can kind of just operate the camera second nature, then it takes you right back into the moment, and also more in the moment. So that thing that people say about, when you're living your life through a lens and not really experiencing, I often think with photography, sometimes you're experiencing it even more if you're in that situation, because you're really starting to see the finer details of a scene or the light of a scene or a certain angle. So you're actually looking at it in more detail than a casual observer.
Totally. No, it's funny. It's funny you say that because like last week, my uncle was at my mom's house and he was helping do some electrical work. And I don't know anything about, being an electrician. So I was kind of like hovering over his shoulder because I like learning and I was kind of watching him. I remember at one point I was like, whoa, Jack, like, how do you know to put that red wire next to that yellow wire or whatever? Like, shouldn't you put it with the red one? And he was just like, and he looks at me and he says, well, how do you know how to change the settings on your camera?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I just sort of know. And he's like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, because I've done it a million times.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, all right, yeah, you got me there.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Yeah, it's fascinating. So for you, I think this would be a good one for you. So what do you think about the experience of taking a photo versus the final product of the actual photo? And so what I mean by that is like, so I'm very much in like photography for me has been something that like it gets me out of bed in the morning. Like I go out at sunrise. I live on the east coast of Australia. So I'm like up in the dark going out to take photos at sunrise every day. And potentially without photography and that wanting to go out and take photos of the ocean, like I may be sleeping in. I don't know if I'd still be like getting up. So it's like, it creates these experiences in your life. You go and chase certain areas because you're going to chase a wave, but then you get the experience of going to that area that maybe like you wouldn't otherwise. So like how much of your photography is about the experience of actually going to do it and actually taking the photos?
Yeah, for sure. I think that like the majority of my like landscapes or nature shots or specifically my wildlife shots have like all come through trying to shoot surfing. And you go to these like really remote places and you see these incredible like landscapes and lighting. And it's like, so it's funny because a lot of the times you're so focused on like, okay, we're trying to score these waves. But then it's like in the middle of all that, you get to see and shoot so much more than that.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest takeaway from maybe shooting surfing specifically is that you get to witness a lot more than just people riding waves.
Yeah, definitely. And also I find like even the kind of the stoke of the actual moment. So like I shoot a lot of backwash waves here. We've got a couple of really good spots. And
awesome.
When that moment happens and you're literally in the moment, like taking the photo, like the feeling that you get when it occurs, like in front of you and you're shooting the photo, like for me is like, it's hard to match that. You come home and you look at the photos and it's like, cool, I'm stoked that it's sharp and I can portray it, you know what I mean? But you couldn't have the same experience viewing it as you could like actually being in the moment, taking it kind of thing.
Well, it's funny you say that because maybe you don't
totally,
feel that experience looking at it, but like, you get that photo printed, put it on a wall and someone walks past it and they have this like,
yeah.
It's the same feeling you have taking it, right? But it's like, they're just witnessing it for the first time. So.
Yeah, for sure. Another quote, I've read a few quotes about you. Marcus spends more time at the beach than any other surf photographer up here. I think that is in a small part a catalyst for further creativity. He's always looking for new ways to shoot old waves. So does that come down to the same thing? Like if you've been to these spots like a lot, then part of this evolution of your photography is like now, like, I think you've mentioned it as that like switching from documenting to creating. It's like now, how can I capture this same subject in a different way?
Yeah, totally. Because I think like, again, where I'm from, it's most of the time here, it's just beach breaks, like within a short driving distance.
Okay.
It's just beach waves, which, obviously they have their day, but the majority of the time it's just like kind of fun and rippable and usually a little messy or whatever. So I think that, I don't know. I feel like surfers work really hard, especially when they're like trying to make it and they're trying to get paid and like all this stuff. So I almost feel like inclined to work as hard with them. So if they shoot and they're keen, like I should be able to do that as well. So it's like, I think, I just don't I don't want to be bored taking photos. So it's like, I don't want to take the same photo twice. So it's like, I feel like surfers almost trust me to take these risks, and it's like, because I'm not, they know that I'm specifically not there to just like fill up their Instagram feed.
Yeah.
So it's like,
for sure.
That I'm going to like try to get something different,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what's your decision process between shooting in the water or shooting from land to get that like backdrop kind of shot? Or do you try and do both in a session
No, I usually like to try and commit to one or the other unless it's like a really like long day and it's going to be really good. But honestly, kind of my mood and energy, especially like with the beach breaks around here. It's like, if I'm in the mood to swim and I want to, then You can't get me out of there. But if I'm feeling like tired and have a coffee, I'm like, maybe I'll just shoot from land or put the drone up, So, but I feel like when the waves are good, it's so hard to not just go swim all the time, every time. Because that's where I get the most happiness, is like being in a big empty barrel with one other person in there.
Yeah, for sure.
The best thing ever.
So unreal.
Sometimes I have to like remind myself to be like, nope, there's lots of different angles. I don't have to shoot this from the water again. So.
Well, that's the other thing. Sometimes those like really like pulled back landscape shots, it's almost like you need a slightly bigger wave or a slightly more perfect wave to make that subject something. Otherwise, it's just going to get lost in the scene if it's not prominent enough. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So like any sort of questionable conditions, it's almost like you wanted to shoot it from the water. But if it's like nice and perfect, it's like you can really show that from land,
Yeah, definitely. So you published a book, which I guess is probably bucket list for pretty much everyone who's picked up a camera and wanted to take photos. So how did that come about? And can you tell us about that a bit?
Man, that was a whirlwind. I am so lucky because the publishing company contacted me.
Okay.
Which is like a rarity, apparently. I have no idea. So they contacted me and asked if I'd be interested. And I was like, yeah, of course I'd be interested. So like we had a bunch of phone meetings, and then we finally got it dialed in, and it was like 2.5 years like in the making. And then, ironically COVID happened, but they were still publishing books. We just couldn't do any any signings or anything. But published the book, and it's called Cold Comfort. And it was something else. It definitely earned a few gray hairs trying to make it. That's for sure.
So is it in continual publication? Like where can people get it? It's just continually being produced? Wasn't like a run?
It's in all the major bookstores in North America anyway. And it's on Amazon too, so it can ship worldwide. And also on my website as well, if you want me to sign a copy for you.
Yeah, awesome. And so is that a further plan for like more books or like different books like in the future?
Yeah, maybe in the future do another coffee table style book. But right now, me and a designer are working on a coffee table style zine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's going to be a bit more like dark and abstract as opposed to Cold Comfort, which I felt was like supposed to appeal to a lot of the masses. This is going to be a bit more like, just different, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what's your actually, a question I wanted to ask you before when you're talking about shooting in the water, is cold water the same for you as like us over in Australia in terms of like, is it still tough being out there in the cold water, or like, cause it sounds crazy to like us over here because we have such like nice water, or did you just grow up with it? So it's, normal for you?
I've just always grown up with it. So it's like, I'm just always been used to the cold water on Vancouver Island. When I started surfing here, it's like that's the only option. So put on the wetsuit and the gloves and the booties and the hood, and you just go do it, right? So
100%. So have you shot much around the world?
Yeah, I've been to a few warm water places and lots of cold water places as well. I will say I'm kind of over the warm water. I remember the last time I went to Mexico, it was like probably the third or fourth time I've been there. I was like, I'm not going to Mexico anymore. It's too hot. Too many bugs. I never make any money. I'm like, just besides the delicious tacos and like laid back culture, I'm just kind of like, maybe I'll go on like a vacation or a surf trip, but I don't really want to like go shoot there anymore.
Okay, yeah. So obviously not like spot naming, but just like countries or locations, like where's some of the spots you've shot outside of Canada that you've liked?
I've been to Scotland, which is incredible. I'm like super excited to go back there one day or just explore more spots in the UK. I've been to Japan, which we went there to shoot surfing, but honestly, I loved everything about that country. Japan is just like amazing. So I'm excited to go back there. Other places, I've been to France a couple times, Portugal, Hawaii, California, where else? Chile. I went to Chile last year. Nice. It was that was a cool country. A lot of lefts. I mean, I'm a regular footer, but I'm like, oh yeah, these lefts look fun. Yeah,
for sure. So what is that like, are they all like work assignment based or just travel? Like what does your work kind of look like now? You sort of mentioned there's not that many magazines around and stuff. So how does surf photography work now?
Yeah, mostly is like partnerships and retainers with brands and stuff. And then a lot of it, I'm just sort of freelancing myself. Like, a few of those trips, I'm just paying my way through all of it and just trying to like make my money back, down the road. And, for me, it's like, that's just kind of what it's all about, is like doing it not to make a shitload of money. Excuse my language. Because it's like, I think if I was going to get into surf photography, I don't know, no one's getting into surf photography to get rich.
Yeah.
And, and that's something that, me and the designer were talking about the other day, actually, for our coffee table zine, is he was like, like, I don't know if we're going to like end up making like that much money because the costs are going to be a little bit higher. And I was like, honestly, I would do this for free. It doesn't matter, like
totally.
I'm not worried about like making money. It's like, I think
well, I mean, you're producing something, like you've got a book now, or you're going to have this zine, or you've got like this catalog of work. So I think that's the thing, like, when we're in this photography world, especially in something that's, like surf related, for example, I think about that a lot as well. It's like, well, because for years I worked like an office job in like sales and marketing, you know what I mean? And you just get to that point where you're like that's why it was cool that you decided at 24, you know what I mean? Like I was already 30 before I decided to even like pick up a camera kind of thing. And you kind of look back on it and you just like, you get to that point where like, I'm just coming in here every day really for nothing. And I'm like completely replaceable. Like the day I leave, they're just going to get someone else to like do my job. Whereas now I feel like I'm creating stuff. So like, no matter what comes of it, like financially, you've got this catalog of stuff to show for it. You can look back on stuff. You're having all these experiences that you wouldn't normally have. And it's just,
Well, it's all just like an investment in yourself and in your life too. Like any opportunity for me to go explore a different part of the world and like take a bunch of photos of my friends surfing and try and sell them. It's like, I'm going to do that like any day of the week, I'm in a position where it's like, I don't have a wife and kids or anything. So it's like, this is my opportunity to be able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So in 2023, who are you trying to sell like those photos to? Is it like the surf brands? Is it just other like brands? Like who's buying stuff?
Surf brands for sure, but a lot of it is non-endemic brands too these days. I feel like if you follow anyone in surfing, it's like everyone's getting their money through non-endemic surf brands. So I feel like that's a really big opportunity that I'm trying to work with as well, and kind of get new clients under my belt, because I feel like more potential money and more opportunity than I don't know, your standard surf brand, like there used to be back in like the late 20s.
100%. And so is the potential then, maybe if you kind of present something to them and they like that image, or they might buy that image off you, then also the further from that might be, hey, let's, like you said, let's link up and do something else beyond that.
And it's like, even like however many years into my surf photography, I'm still grinding on the emails, like knocking on the door saying, hey, I'm a photographer, look at all these photos, what do you think? Do you want to work together? Like it's not like once you make it as a photographer, then like everyone just wants to work with you. You still have to kind of keep up that hustle, right?
100%. Yeah, I love it. No, it's like, it's super cool for people to hear, because that's the thing. A lot of the time, as I touched on before, I think a lot of people just see the shiny object, see the Instagram feed, and just think that everything's like, easy and like coming to people. But it's just cool to hear the actual story behind it. Yeah. So we touched on social media before, but do you? And it's good, I know that you're not probably placing, your career importance of it, but do you feel like in this day and age, like any, I don't know if it's the right word, but any like pressure to create or pressure to put content out to kind of stay, I don't know, relevant in that world at all? Or
that's an interesting question, because, like I think I probably put a bit of pressure on myself, like, to like post something if I haven't posted in a while or whatever. But to be honest, like the majority of my favorite photographers I follow, they like never post anything.
And
I'm not sure if it's like that's like a flex, or if it's like they're just genuinely too busy to post. Because I find that with myself, if I've got a lot going on, a lot of work, like I don't even think about Instagram or social media. It's usually when I'm bored, I'm like, this might be a good chance to like post something, right? So I don't know. I just take it as it is, and I ebb and flow a lot with social media. Sometimes I'm like all about it and just want to post and create content or whatever. But sometimes I'm literally just deleting the app and just like putting my phone on airplane mode and just like going camping or something because I don't want to deal with it.
100%. Yeah. Do you get any work out of it? But as far as like, I know you said you got approached for the book. Do you get approached for stuff?
Kind of like I won't say no, but I won't say yes. Like, yeah, I think social media is really great to like make those introductions and people kind of reach out and then you kind of start this conversation. Like you reached out to me through Instagram. Like that's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's why I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think social media is a huge tool just to like reach out to your favorite photographers and just say, hey, love your work. Like what advice can you give to me? As opposed to necessarily being like, you know, I'm not sliding in the DMs of like Rip Curl being like, hey, Rip Curl. Like, you know, so I think there's a lot of benefits to being active on social media in that way. Maybe not necessarily financially, but like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And you've kind of touched on it, but I kind of like this, as I said, because like one of the things with this podcast I really like is for people to, find out more about the mindset and stuff behind the people. So I'll just read it out. I think this is from you. It's work hard and take risks. It took me a while to realize I had to back myself into a corner financially, physically, and mentally, only to claw my way out of it. If you want to do photography full time, just keep shooting. So I'm pretty sure that's one of your quotes from somewhere, but
that's really something I said once.
Yeah. Can you kind of like expand on that? Like, I guess, that financially, physically, mentally, like backing myself into a corner only to claw my way out. So how's that experience been for you?
Yeah, well, you know, financially, when I decided to take on photography full time, I only had like a couple grand in the bank. I didn't really have a safety net. I was just sort of like, okay, well, I'll see what happens if I run out of money. Like, you know, at the end of the day, I was like, well, I could always get a job serving or like working at like a surf shop or something, right? So I was just sort of like, I'll see how long I can do this for. That was literally my mindset. So that was the financial struggle for sure. Physically, it was really hard because I was barely sleeping because I'd like stay up all night editing photos, and then I would get up really early and like start sending emails, sending my photos around, and then as soon as the sun came up, I just start shooting. So it's like, physically I was absolutely exhausted, but I was like grinding away at it. And then mentally, it's like, oh man, I don't know. It takes a toll on you when you're like focusing so hard on one thing. And it's like, I ended up like having a lot of anxiety and getting like pretty depressed, like within, you know, the first year of doing it full time, right? It was really hard for me. And it's like, and to this day, I still struggle with anxiety, but it's like, it's different now. And I'm like much older and I have a lot more tools, but it's like, it was really hard for me. And yeah,
that's amazing. It's a really, really cool story. Thank you so much for being a part of it. As I said, I really like everything that I've kind of like looked into with you. I really resonate with like how much like shooting you've done, how you've like put yourself out there, how you've just like gone out like day after day. So I, like you just mentioned then, like, you know, sometimes there's a struggle through it, but I think that's important for people to know. It's like, that might be the case, but you've come out the other side. But without that in the first place, like you don't have those hours that you've put in there. You don't have that knowledge that you have. You don't go through the process of, you know, your typical shots to move on to something more creative to like grow. You don't have the catalog of like images that you have. So it's just like, it's not as not necessarily always rainbows, as I said, but like you've done the hard yards and gone through it. And it's like, it's an amazing story and it's really cool to hear.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the journey and it still is the journey.
Still going.
You know? It never really ends. And it took me like quite a few years to realize that. It's like, you know, when I was younger, I always thought like, you know, one day I'm going to come out with a book and then that's going to be like the peak of my career. And then it's like, you know, I came out with a book 2 or 3 years ago and I'm kind of like, all right, well, like what's next now? You know? So it's like, it just kind of keeps evolving. And I think, that's just kind of how it is. And I think young photographers on Instagram need to remember that because, you know, I think everyone gets obsessed with like followers and likes and engagement, but it's like, honestly, just don't even worry about it. Just focus on taking photos. That's it. Here's a good quote for you. Take photos. Wait, hold on a sec. Take more photos, make less content, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. No, I really like it. Yeah. And I like, I mean, it's probably still the same now, but I've seen you say before that like, you don't like being asked what your favorite photo is. Like, number one, because if you had a favorite photo, then you'd be like at the end of your career, or also like my favorite photo is the next one I'm going to take, which is like speaks to that motivation of wanting to keep like going out there.
Yeah, totally, man. And it's like, I don't think I'll ever have a good answer for what my favorite photo is.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you.
We'll see. Yeah. I answer that question with a question back. I'm like, what do you think your favorite? Do you think?
I think it's a great way to go about it. Yeah, that's amazing, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I hopefully some people that see this are learning about you for the first time, or hopefully there's a lot of people that have just seen your photos on social media and have now learned a bit more about you. So it's been really cool to get to know you. Cheers, man.
Sweet, man. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Cheers.